there are a lot of fantastic, just a moment. Ah, boy. That was my Americano that I made this morning, and I put a small little teaspoon of sugar in there, and I think I forgot to stir it because I just finished it off. I thought it wasn't very sweet, but that last part, it made up for it. Where was I? Oh yeah, there are a lot of organizations out there, both Christian and non-Christian, that do great work. They serve the poor. They help people. They're not selfish. They do great work. I absolutely love it. But the Christian organizations serve for a different reason. They do it to show the love of Jesus, and by doing so, people are intrigued about Jesus. They hear more about him. They ultimately say, hey, this Jesus guy, he had it right. I agree with him. I trust him. And bam, they go to heaven. Whoa, I just summed up the whole gospel just like that. Thank you very much. The gospel, according to BeauCh. Kind of sacrilegious. Oh boy, where was I? Jesus, things like that. Oh, serving. Why do we serve? Have you ever heard the saying, are you going to line people up well-fed, well-dressed, and happy? You're going to line up those people in front of the gates of hell. I know that's a little harsh, isn't it? But allow me to sort of unpack this. There is a story behind it. And the story is in Africa when we were on Mercy Ships. And Mercy Ships is one of those organizations that does really good work. They're good people, and I really strongly believe they show the example of Jesus quite well. Jesus was all into helping the poor, and he just did that because he loved God. And what spilled out of loving God was helping people, and ultimately showing these people their sin and getting them right with God and getting them into heaven. That is what ultimately matters to a Christian organization, is getting people into heaven. But there are many organizations that are Christian, were formerly Christian, that maybe started Christian, that has sort of lost sight of why they serve people. And that is to get people into heaven. I find that more often than not, organizations sort of steer away from talking about Jesus because they don't want to offend people. Like, oh no, we want to accept and embrace all people. And look, you can serve people of any race, ethnicity, religion. It doesn't matter as long as you're serving them selflessly. But you're doing it with the motive of getting them into heaven. And that, more often than not, that means that you kind of have to disagree with them at some point. It doesn't mean you don't love them. You can still love while disagreeing. And that's possible. Love does not mean I endorse absolutely everything about you. That's ridiculous. We couldn't do that. No one agrees with anybody 100% these days, even Christian to Christian. It's just not possible. But what matters is Jesus. It's really all that matters. So, Mercy Ships, there we were, and Liz and I got a little trouble because we saw that Mercy Ships was very quiet about their beliefs. Now you can be quiet about what you believe. That's fine, and God can still work. But they were overly secretive, like very hush hush. And that, when you get to that point with your beliefs, you're no longer a part of a faith. Faith means trust, and that is you're trusting that God will make things work out. But when you distance yourself from that faith, you start to trust yourself. And when you trust yourself, you trust your own actions. And those actions can be good actions like serving people, but you see where this is going? You're still doing the good work, but you're doing it more so for your own benefit. Because it might feel good to you. And it does feel good to serve people. It does. But they lose sight of getting people into heaven. And so that's where that saying kind of comes from, is you can take care of people, you can get them well dressed, well fed, and heal them, but ultimately that doesn't really matter when you die. We all die. And what matters is what happens after you die. Not meaning to preach at you for a moment. So we actually talked with one of the surgeons on board the ship, a brilliant, brilliant fellow. And we said, we kind of have this concern with this organization that we're serving, that people don't know that we're doing this because we love Jesus. Do the Africans think that we're just doing this because we're a bunch of rich white Americans and we're just doing this because we feel bad that we're rich? Believe it or not, a lot of organizations do that. That's their motive. Like, oh, I feel so guilty. Look at how much money I make. And they go out and they help people because of that. I have no issue with them helping people, but what I do have an issue with is they're doing it because they feel guilty and they want to make themselves feel better. They're not really doing it because they love the people. I know I'm being all judgmental here. It's like, Beau, how dare you judge these people's hearts? Well, you know what? I am, especially when they say that they're doing it as a Christian. If you're doing it as a Christian, tell people that you're doing it because you love Jesus. Don't be ashamed of your faith. Oh my goodness. So we talked with this surgeon guy, and he's like, it's interesting that you say this because I had these exact same thoughts a few years ago. And he proceeded to tell us about the history of mercy ships. That is the spiritual history. And he said initially when they started, they were very Christian. It was obvious that they did the help for Africans because they loved Jesus. That's great. And then he said throughout the years that the pendulum started swinging to the opposite side. And he said that's when the mercy ships started to do it less for Jesus and more because they were basically the Red Cross. It's like, hey, we're here to help people. And this whole Jesus thing, we he's okay. And that's dangerous. That's not cool. But he said, which was very, very interesting, he said, the pendulum is starting to swing back. It's like, what do you mean? And Dr. Tertius, this fellow, he said, the pendulum is swinging back to mercy ships doing it for Jesus. That is, they actually have a chaplain nearby after the person is done with their surgery. Not to force the gospel down people's throats, but to have it available there. And that's what needs to be present in a Christian-based organization, or that is an organization driven by Jesus and his example. It needs to be accessible. You can't guess people into heaven. It's like, oh, we're just going to secretly go about doing our good works, and maybe, just maybe, these people will be like, I wonder why they do this. And they'll guess that we're Christians. And oh, surprise, they get into heaven, and look, we didn't even have to be awkward about telling them that we love Jesus. It shouldn't be an awkward thing. And if it is an awkward thing, then you're not right with God. You have to be confident. That is faith-driven. So that's a little bit about the spiritual dynamic there on mercy ships. I'd say the vast majority of the crew volunteering, they were Christian, or are Christian rather. And it's very, very cool to see an organization starting to kind of go back to their roots and serve people because they're concerned about their spiritual well-being. and not just their physical well-being. Because, as you know, so far, it's 100% death rate. What happens after?